confirming the audio is good. I know you guys complained a lot about the audio, so let me know if it's okay and you can hear me.
Sir, how can I on the
Yes, we can hear you.
this thing? Sir?
All right, everyone, we'll be starting soon. Let's just give our colleagues about 2 minutes. Okay, about a minute and then we'll start. So in the meantime, please mute your mic,
And
turn off your cameras, and we'll get started very soon. Thank you. Turn off your cameras. I don't want to see people's faces today. You guys turn off your cameras. Thank you. You can drop a message in the Discord channel to let your colleagues know that the class is about to start, so you don't miss it. Can you hear me? Someone said he can't hear me. I was actually muted, but confirm if you can hear me now. Just give me a thumbs up or you drop a message in the chat. Okay, I'll do. And you can see me, right? All right, everyone. Everyone. So it's good to finally see you guys again. We're supposed to have a blogger session yesterday, but the audio seems to be an interference. So we shifted the blogger session to Saturday. So today we'll have our live class and tomorrow as well. And our blogger session will be on Saturday morning. So please don't miss it. So for today, let's quickly get started. So I'll take my pledge, and while I take my pledge, you all should take your pledge as well. So I, Hannah Iwobi, pledge to keep it real, practical, insights, and straight to the point with you guys in this journey. I'll answer your questions and help you make data science less scary and ensure that we all have fun while we set up. All right, moving on. Before we move on, I just want to quickly note that in case at any point I'm moving too fast or you can't hear me, just drop a message in the chat box and I'll respond to them. So we're supposed to treat databases today, but I noticed that for some of us, we've not actually gone through the course materials enough. So I wanted to treat functions today so that we can have sorry, give me a minute. Sorry for the interruption. So as I was saying, I noticed that for some of us, we haven't actually gone to the first material anymore. So I'll be taking us on functions so that we can provide the level ground against our module next week. So the sorry, Mustafa, like I said, when you're in class, please turn off your mic and turn off your camera as well. All right, so let me just quickly go through the course outline. So this is it. We are currently in module 1, and from what you can see, it has been arranged according to the days of the week. Mr. Please turn off your mic. All right, so from what you can see here, it has been arranged according to the days of the week. So we started last week Friday, so this was Friday till Sunday, and this is this new week. Today being Thursday, I expected to have gone through this regular expression. Sorry, today being Thursday, supposed to have gone through this Python API tutorial and this hands-on study, which is a course material, and then it's recommended learning as well. So, like I mentioned on the group, this is a link to all of the notebooks you'll be using for module 1. And for the recommended learnings, something like before and biology, you just simply need to click on it to take you to a YouTube page and you can watch the video. So we'll just get started. So if you have any questions, just let me know and then I will respond to them. All right, so today we'll be talking about functions. Functions. So in Python or in data science generally, you get to use a whole lot of functions. And what are functions? Functions are usable blocks of code that help you carry out specific tasks. So I'll come to what a specific task looks like and why functions are important. So why do we need to use functions? We need to use functions because we only need to write the code once and then we can use it many times. I'll give us a practical example about what this is. And the next thing is that it helps us organize our code into smaller chunks that are easier to understand. And also it helps make the work very easy. So you find out that when you begin to write or carry out data science tasks, you would certainly encounter errors or you might have issues here and there. So to make it easier for you to find out where issues are coming from and how you can fix it. So that's what the problem means. I also noted here that it will help you divide and conquer problems, like help you break it down into smaller pieces to consume. So now a practical example of what a function is your charger, for example. So now this charger, I hope you cannot see it. Now this charger is an example of a function in that the job of this function of this charger or the specific task for this charger is to charge your phone. So you take your phone and then you plug it in, right? So you don't need to every time you want to charge your phone, you say, okay, this is how you charge my phone. You charge it at okay, I will zoom out. Noted. So for back to the charger example. So you don't a Python function is such that you don't have to keep on. Let's say you want to calculate the area of a triangle or the area of a rectangle. You don't need to keep on writing the same formula over and over again. So if you have to calculate the area of a rectangle, like 10 places in your code, you don't have to keep on going back to say, okay, this times this 20 tables, you just need to define it once. So back to the charger example. So just the same way as you know that this charger, you only need to pick it up and then plug your phone and then your phone charges. You don't need to do anything else. It's the same thing with your functions because you don't, when you want to charge your phone, you don't begin to say, okay, I need to write it down. Okay, this is how you charge my phone. You charge it at 5% per minute. So every 5 minutes or every minute, you have to include charge up to 5%. It does that automatically because the program or you have been given a set of instructions on how to operate. So that's it for the charger. So let me move over to the notebook. So here we are. Let me zoom in. Let me zoom in a bit. Is it much better now for the functions or for the notebook? All right, moving ahead. So the first example here is a function to calculate the area of the rectangle. function to calculate the area of the rectangle. So like I said, now to calculate the area of the rectangle is, has four sides. This side is longer, this side is shorter. So we have the heights and then the width. So we know that to calculate the area of a rectangle, it has to be the width times the height. So we just come here and say DEF calculate area. So calculate area is the name of the function. This is the name of the function, open brackets. The parameters that you want to define, which include width and height. And then we say beneath it, area equals to width times height. So let me move down so I can further explain what this the parts of this function is. So how to define a function in Python. So the first step is the DEF. So before you define a function, the first thing you should write is DEF, which means define. So it tells Python that, okay, well, I want to define a function. So you say DEF. Then the next thing is the function name, like we saw here. Our function name in this instance is calculate area. And so we define it. You could also say calculate triangle, calculate set, whatever you choose to name it. That is it. Then you have the block of code inside the function. So you said, okay, well, the name of this my function is charger. Now, it's now for you to say, okay, inside this charger that is the function. How do I want it to operate? Do I want it to charge a phone at 5% per minute or at 10% per second? Because that's what you now define, or you give it set of instructions on how to actually charge your phone. So the same thing that applies here. So when we go back to this area of the rectangle, we see that our block of code is area, so that's a variable name, is equal to the width. Remember, in the last class, I talked about what variables are, and I said that variables are like containers. So here, our variable name or our container name is area, and we are saying that, okay, this area, which is our container, we are equating it to the multiplication between the width and then the height. So we are saying, okay, width times height, whatever you calculate, put it inside this container. You get, so that is it. So when you come back here, you see that block of code inside the function, and then we say print the result. So for the calculate area function, you see that after we are done defining the block of code we want to be inside the function, we come down and say return area or print area. I will show us the difference between printing the area and returning the area. So if you run this code, let me run this code. It might take a minute since this is the first time running the code. So you see that after we run this code, it would, by running this code means that you are saving this particular function into the memory into Python's memory. So the code was successful. And then when we move on, we say, okay, so now we have a rectangle and the width is 5 and the height, the height is 5 and then the width is 10. So logically speaking, that would be 5 times 10. So 5 times 10 is 50. So when you run this code here, this code block, you have 50. So 50 is the area of the rectangle. If at the same time you say, okay, no, I want to change it and say, okay, the width is 7 and the width is 7 and the height is the height here, or the width is 6 and the height is 8. So you just define that and then click on the run button and give you 21 and 48. So that's how the function operates. So let me come back to this. So there are several parts of defining a function. So there is the DEF, which is the keyword that tells Python that they are trying to define a function. And then there is the function name. And then you have parentheses. That parenthesis is very important, as you can see here, because the parenthesis acts like a folder, like it holds the parameters you are defining, which in this case are width and height. And moving down, you also see the column. So if you should write a function, let me do this. Let me come back to this and remove this column. And then let me run the code. You see, there is an error. It says syntax error, expected column. So what this tells you that if you should miss that column, it will certainly throw up a syntax error because you are disrupting how it is being organized. So if you miss anything here, anything, this is what we call a syntax. A syntax is how things are being organized, how things are being arranged. You know, for example, people that are organized, when you come into their space, you know that it's already organized their table, maybe their laptop is here, their school bag is here. And if you should move it, if you should move their school bag or move their book, you'll come and be like, okay, why did you move it? Because it disrupts the flow of how they interact with the room, right? So in this case, we'll go back and add our column because we missed it initially. So we add our column and run our code. And everything works just as fine. Moving on. So the last part is the indentation. So you will notice here that after the column, when you press enter, it automatically helps you do the indentation. But if you say, no, I don't like it like that, and you come back here and say, okay, let me put area to be equal to width times height. And then let me clear out this part. And then you say return area. And then let's press enter. Now we have an indentation error. So remember I mentioned that there are several parts. There's the DEF, the keyword, the function name, the parentheses, the column, and then the indentation. So it's very important that you include your indentation. Let me adjust this once again so that we go back to what we have. And then we run the code again. And we are back on track. So it's very important that you take note of your indentation, else you will always have this errors. So now the next thing is calling a function. So to use a function that you define, you just have to type in a function name followed by parentheses. So let me come back to this example I was giving here. So this in itself is a function. So it means that anytime I call this function, it's going to print out hello world. So when I run this, and then I decide to also run this as well. You see that because I call this function, even though I name it as function name, like I said, you can name it charger, you can name it just like with the container example I gave. You can decide to name your container whatsoever you choose. So it's the same thing here. So whenever I call this function, it prints out hello world. Now, the next part is functions with parameters. I mentioned earlier in the rectangle example that width and height are parameters used in calculating the area of a rectangle. There's no way you can calculate the area of the rectangle without obviously knowing the width and the height. How else do you want to calculate it? So you have to know the width, or you have to be able to define the width and the height of a rectangle for you to be able to calculate its area. So that's why we have here that functions with parameters. You can make your functions more flexible by passing in parameters. So these parameters are called inputs, and these parameters allow or provide information that the function will use when it runs. So now let's have this. So in this function example, I said define greet. So greet is a function name. I'm saying, okay, function, whenever I call you, you greet person that has this particular name. So now the parameter I'm using here is name. So name is a variable name which holds the name of a person, animal, place, or thing. That's really of it now. Anyways, so when you come here and then we define this, let me comment this out so that we can see, what it looks like. And let me just simply remove this first of all. So when I remove this and then I run this code, now our code has worked fine. So I can come down and define a new code cell. And then paste this. So whenever I call the function greet and add a person's name inside, you will notice that I used our double quotes or single quote because it helps us to define that, okay, this is actually a string. It's not a number and it's not a boolean either. So when I define our variable name or our name in this case as Alice or as Bob, and then I run this code, now it means that whensoever I call this function on a person's name, I can decide to change the person's name and say, okay, I want to greet Hannah. So when I run this code, I find that I have hello Alice, hello Hannah. So that is how this works. Does one have a question? So please drop your questions in the chat and I will attend to them within the class. Someone can't see my screen. Okay, can you guys hear me? Someone said my voice is low. If you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up so that I can proceed. Give me a thumbs up if the network is good, if you can hear me. All right, thank you. Okay, Agent, I'm actually sharing my screen, so it might be your network. So let me proceed. I think you're good. All right. Let me still make sure. Yeah, it's sharing. All right, so let's move on. So functions with return variables or values. Sometimes I noted here that sometimes you might want to create a function, or you might want a function to calculate or process something and then return the results. And you can use this return statement to send back the value. So now let's look at this. Let me remove this part out. And let's define our function. Now this function is used to add two numbers, A and B. So if we define this, so you know in the former example I did, I said you define your function name, you put the parameters inside, and then you have a block of code just underneath it. So in this case, we are using another slightly different method, but still gives us the same thing. So let me run this code and I'll show you the difference. Now, this code or this function defines the function called add numbers. And then it takes two parameters, A and B, that is to represent two numbers. And then we say, okay, return A plus B. So if we saw what we did here, we just compressed what could have been a line. What could have been, let's say we call this sum. And the sum should be equal to A plus B. And then we remove this and put sum instead. And then we click run. Now it still gave us the same thing, you get. So what this means is we can actually compress the block of code aspect or line and then put it in the return section. That's what I did earlier. So let me quickly remove this and then we'll go back to what we had before. And then we'll come back here and do A plus B. So now if I should call the function down and say add numbers. Let me just select it since we have it. And then I say, okay, I want to add 516 plus 987654. And then I say 1. Okay, looks like we have an error. So you can still just see that I still added plus here instead of comma. So I will quickly remove that and then put comma instead to signify that, okay, these are two separate numbers. And then run the code again. You guys said this is the total number, or this is the summation of the two values you imputed into your function. And let me go back to I pasted something earlier. Okay, let me quickly undo this. Let's go back to our original code so I can explain the difference between this. So now here we have, let me run this again. Now, when we called our function, we said, okay, result equal to. Now, result again is a variable name, our container that is supposed to house the summation of 3 and 5. So when I say I called this function, I say, okay, this function, I need to add these two numbers together. And when you add it together, I want you to print out the result. So the total value gave us 8. That's what we have here. So I noted here that here, add numbers takes two arguments, A and B, or two parameters, A and B, and then adds them together and returns the result. And this returned value is then stored in the result variable. Remember, our container is housing the summation of this value. Now, there are several types of parameters that we can use. Parameters again, let me reiterate. Parameters refers to the values or the variables that you put in your parentheses. So you have your function name and you have your parentheses. So the parameters or the variables you put in those parentheses are what we call parameters. And so we have positional parameters, we have default parameters, and we have keyword parameters. I would explain what all of that means very soon. Let me just quickly check the chat box. Okay. So please, in case you can't see my screen or you can't hear me, please check your network. I think that's probably the issue. Going back, so positional parameters, just like the name implies, has to do with position. Just the same way as, for example, you want to write your name. You know that's obviously your first name comes before your last name. Although there are exceptions where people write their last name before their first name, but we're not talking about exceptions here. So let's assume a case. Or for example, let's say they ask you to write the names of your siblings in accordance or in order of the way they gave birth to you guys. So obviously your eldest sibling, her name or his name has to come first. So if you are the second child, your name obviously has to come second. So that's what position actually looks like. So remember our greet function we created earlier. So let's create another greet function, but say, okay, this greet function, I want you to take two parameters. And the parameters I want you to take should be the first name and the last name, which means that if anybody should switch it will actually reflect in the final result. So we say, okay, function greet, I want you to take two parameters, the first name and the last name, and I want you to print out this. So if we can remember from our first class or second class where I talked about print formatting, where I said you could use F string. So you find out here that we use the F string so that we can also feature in other letters that are different from our parameters. Let me come back with it. So let me take this bit by bit so that we can get what I'm trying to say. So I say print, I want the function, the greet function to be able to print I want the greet function to be able to print hello, Hannah is okay, right? So that's what I want to do. So how do I do something like that in Python? So there are several ways to achieve this. So I'll show us one of the alternative methods of doing it. So I'll say, okay, print, let me put my hello in double quotation marks, and then I say hello. Okay, let me backtrack a bit. So I say hello, comma, then I go out of it and then say first name RST. So just select it here. The good thing about using Google Colab is that it helps you, it brings out the variable names. If you define it, it makes it easier for you to just fill it in. So I say, okay, first name, then I want a space, so I can define a space using just double quotation marks or single quotation marks as the case may be. I do that, this space inside, then move out and say, okay, then the last name underscore name. And you have to see. Then let me just quickly move this fast to bring it back later. Let me see, is anything I miss? Yeah, there's a comma comma here. So let me run this code and see what it is. It's like you have an error. Let's see what the error, let's see what the error says. Right, invalid syntax. So you would see that we miss a comma here. So let's put a comma here and then run our code once more. Now our code runs just fine. So if we say okay, let's guys, sorry for that breaking translation. So I will just go back to where it stopped. So please, if you
Please, good evening, everyone. Has the class ended?
I think network glitches. I want to ask a
I think,
facilitator question.
I think she's having a problem with network connection, so that's why just hold on, chill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Please, guys, how am I able to get any of the organizers? I really need their support.
You need support on what? Although you can chat them up on Discord, but you need support on what?
Yeah, I've not gotten login details for my core 3 this the dare.io yet.
hello everyone, I really do apologize for the breaking transmission thing. So let's quickly continue. I think I'm here to talk about the Discord issue. So you could maybe drop the question you have in the comments, in the chats, and the CX team look into that. All right, so where did we stop? So please, if you have any questions, please drop it in the chat box so that I can look at them as soon as we're done. We're moving on. This is still coming up. Let's just give it some time. Okay, this is actually taking me back. Okay, all right. So how many of us are still having issues with installing Jupyter Notebook on our device? Between print and return, I'm going to show you that very soon. Chinaya, right? Yeah, Jane. I'll show you the difference very soon. Okay, this is perfect. Not yet. Any other question? Are you still having issues installing Jupyter Notebook? Anybody? Israel, you already have access to the course material. If you remember the notes, the Excel sheet I shared with you, I've said this repeatedly on the group chats on Discord, that if you're having issues with your dashboard, all you need to do is access this particular sheet which I've shared over and over again on the Discord channel. And this provides very clear direction on what to do from start to finish. So you know that when you come to this sheet, the first thing you need to do is go through this course material. And since this had a live session, that means there's a recording for that live session. You ask for the recording to the live session and to be given to you. So I don't know, at this particular point in time, I do not expect that we still have issues with accessing the course material. The course material is available on the dashboard, and if you're having issues with the dashboard, let us know on the Discord channel so that we can handle the issue for you while you use the Google Sheet I provided earlier to access your course material. So I believe that should sort the issue. Donald, you need assistance with Jupyter Notebook. What exactly is the issue? Mark and Irfan, please turn off your cameras. Bumi, how can I save the notebook you sent or my Jupyter notebook so that I don't need to go online before I access it? Okay, so for that, you can simply just download it. You can simply download it here, download IPYNB, and then open it up on your Jupyter notebook. So whenever you're done practicing, just Control Save, and then it saves the notebook. So let me go back to where we stopped so that we can move on. We still have about an hour and 30 minutes or thereabouts to spend. I would like to cover this before we go. All right, so we stopped at positional parameters and we stopped here. So when I do this, okay. All right, let's do this. Then we can. It didn't return an error. Let me go back. Okay. So we forgot the comma. Where did we forget that comma? Yeah. After this, we forgot to put the comma. So I will put that right now. Then run the code again. Now our code works just fine. So I can now say, okay, so greet, I want you to greet Hannah, comma, and my last name is IGBOK, IGBOK, and then I click on run. Now again. We are having Hannah and Iboke, and then they are not in our double quotation marks or single quotation marks. So the reason why I'm doing this is so that you can begin to see where your errors are probably coming from. Let's say you're running in code and then you encounter an error or you encounter an issue. So you easily know, okay, what's the first thing I need to do? What do I need to look at? So if you look at this this error code or this error message, you see that Hannah is not defined. This means that it has not been enclosed in double quotation marks. So we'll just do that now. To enclose this in double quotation marks, and then repeat the same thing for the last name, and run our code. Now, hello, Hannah, and we are done. So moving on, you see that, okay, when we greet Bill Clinton, that was the former name that was there. You see that Python matches the first argument, which is Bill, to the first parameter, which is first name, and the second argument, Clinton, to the second parameter, last name. So if I should change this, and then, because sometimes in our hurry to type, we don't actually think of what we're doing, and then we run this. You see that it reverses the name, and then since you said, okay, Iboke is supposed to be the first name, it takes that the first name, and Hannah as the last name, and that is how that works. So let me also try this with Clinton view. That was this is me showing you how you end up switching the names. So I noted here that it's important that for positional parameter that you pass it in the correct order. So if the first name is supposed to come before the last name, make sure that you pass in the first name for the last name and not the other way around. Now, default parameters. So when you hear the word default, it means like just like when you're using your Android phone or your iPhone, for example, they are what they call default settings. That was how the manufacturer of your phone decided to set it. Like let's say, for example, if whenever you open up your phone to take a picture, it waits 5 seconds before it actually captures that picture. That's an example of a default setting. So you can decide and say, okay, no, I don't want to wait for 5 seconds. I want to make it 0 seconds or 2 seconds. That is you now changing it from the default setting to what you desire, right? So now let's say, for example, our greet function wants to change that and say, okay, first name, the user can enter the first name, and the user can either decide to enter the first name or they can decide to leave it, right? So now we say, okay, define greet to take in the first name, and then we say last name. Since I'm the manufacturer of this particular function, I can say last name is equal to Smith. That is my own settings for this particular function. So think of default parameters as settings, just the same way as you have default settings for your phone. Now, for your function, since you are the manufacturer of your function, you can have default settings for your Python function. Now, when we run this code, let me quickly remove this, or let me remove the down part so you can see the difference. Now I say greet Alice, and I just entered only the first name. I didn't bother entering the last name. And then I run this, sorry. And then I run this code. Now we see that it says hello Alice, and then since you didn't define the last name, you just gave it, you just used the default settings we had already and said, okay, hello Alice Smith. But now let's say instead you say no, we have a last name, I'm going to put it, and then we'll do this. So now this name, this last name we entered now overwrites the default settings that we put in place. Remember the phone example I gave. Your phone comes with the camera. The taking a picture takes about 5 seconds. That was the default setting that the manufacturer of the phone puts in place. But then you, as the user, said, okay, no, I don't want it to be 5 seconds. I want it to be 2 seconds. And then you changed it from 5 seconds to 2 seconds. So that's exactly what is happening in this block of code. And so when you run it, we have this as our result. So this explanation here is simply what I just explained now about the difference between imputing the last name and we just using what we have as the default setting. So in summary, default parameters are useful when you want to make some parameters optional. So let's say you don't want it to be like, they don't necessarily have to put in a last name. They can just work with the default setting. Then you know that this is what you need to use. So why it's important for us to understand the way parameters work is because when we define our function, depending on what you want your function to do, that will determine how you decide to manufacture your function. So you always have to think about, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to create a function for calculating the sum of a rectangle, or for calculating the sum of squares, or whatsoever? That will define how you structure your function. Because you will not structure your function for calculating an area of a rectangle, same way you structure your function for greeting somebody. They are two different things, and the way you define it also differs. Let me see if there are any questions. Right. So we can move on. So now, keyword parameters. So if you remember in the last session, which was on Saturday, I talked about keywords and how they apply in Python. And I also mentioned that there are some names or some variable names you cannot use. So you cannot use print as a variable name because print is a special word. So you can think of keywords as special words that already have their designated task in Python. So it's the same thing that applies here. So here we say keyword parameters allow you to specify which parameter gets which value, regardless of the order of the parameters. So let's go back to our first example that we gave, or one of our examples that we gave about the greet function that takes in first name and last name. So this is it. So now, remember what I said about that the way you enter the variables determine what it gets assigned to. So even though Iboke is my last name, but then I put it in position of the first name, that means the Python function decided to now map my last name to my first name because that was how I entered it into the function when I called the function. So now what keyword parameters tells us is that you can actually use equal to alongside the variable name or alongside the parameter name to actually define it. So here we have a greet function that takes in the first name and the last name, and then we want to print out hello first name and last name. So we come here and say, okay, greet equal to, or greet open brackets, greet open bracket, last name equal to Doe, and first name equal to John. And then we run this code. Now you can see that even though we entered last name before the first name, it still came out as expected because we had said categorically said that okay, it's just like saying let your yes be yes and your no no. So in this case, I said okay, greet function. I want the last name to be equal to this and the first name to be equal to this. So even though I don't enter it in the right order, do it in the right order in which I manufacture the function, this is how I want you to read it. So now what this function does is that it says, okay, this last name looks like what I have doing, or it looks like what I have in my settings. So it looks like, okay, last name is actually in the second place doing the function definition. And then this first name is actually in the first place doing the function definition and says, okay, I understand what you want me to do, and then it arranges it accordingly. So you can always have that in mind. So this is to show you how flexible Python programming language is. So in one of the classes, I think the first that I mentioned that Python is both versatile and very flexible. So if you're looking to do very flexible programming, then you know that Python is going to be your language of choice. So, okay, I'll also give an example here. I say that if you should run this code, you'll also have something similar. So you can say, do it John, and then it will automatically understand that, okay, John is supposed to be the first name, since we already defined the last name to be short to go, right? So it obviously means that, okay, since this last name has already been defined to this, then that only leaves us with the first name, which we can allocate to the name or the variable John. So that completes it. So now let's look at putting all of these examples or putting all of these ideas together into one block of code. So now we say this function is going to be defined as describe a person, and this person has a name, an age, and then a city. And then we say, okay, we want you to print out the function, or want you to print out name is then the age, years old, and lives in city. And then we say describe person Alice, describe person Bob and 30, and then we provide the variable, we provide the names for this parameter name and for this parameter city. So when we run this code, now we have Alice is 25 years old and lives in Brazil. Now you see that the difference between this code and this one and this particular code here and this last one is in the way they interact with the parameters. For this first one, we only just gave it the name of the person and it's used the default setting it has. We said, okay, since you only provided the name of the person, that means Alice is 25 years old and lives in Brazil. But if you're like, okay, no, this is not correct. The person's age, Alice's age is not 25 and she doesn't live in Brazil. So it's now left for you as a user to change the default setting and say, okay, I want Alice to be 50 years. So you can come here and say, okay, Alice is 50 years and she lives, okay, our double quotation, she lives in Nigeria. And then we run this code again. Okay, let me remove this stuff here. So now you said, okay, we've changed the default set and we have Alice is 50 years old and she lives in Nigeria. So it's something that applies here. We defined Bob's age as 30 and then it worked to the default setting of city equal to Brazil. And for Charlie, we have that Charlie is 25 years old and lives in Paris because we defined Paris as our city of choice. So here I note here that name is a positional parameter, age and city are default values, and you can use keyword parameters to pass in the name city or the name of the city and the name of the person without worrying about the order. So now I think it was Chinere or somebody that mentioned I have some questions. Let me quickly cover this and I'll come back to your question. But keep your questions coming in. I'll address them. So I think it was Chineye or Jane. I think that same person, that mentioned what is the difference between return and print the function call. Now I will show you what the difference is. So let's remove this and then we run this code. So what happens here is that we say define add to take in two numbers x and y and return the sum of these values, that is x plus y. Remember what I mentioned about collapsing the block of code into that return section there. So we are saying define a function that adds two numbers x and y and return the result of the summation. Do you get it? Now let me bring back our formal code. Now here we are saying add two numbers and then just print out the results. Let me run this code so that I can show you what I mean in the next section. And then we come here and say, and run this. Now, we are using the first function, which is add x and y, and then we return the summation value. Now, when we set the result is the variable there, and we set equal to add 3 plus 5, and then we printed out the result. This is what we had, right? Now, I said our answer here is 8 because our function used return. So it simply takes the result and then assigns it to the variable result. Let me backtrack. So what happens in a function that you decide to use return for is that it returns the value, but it will need you to assign a variable name, like a container. So the return here just serves as a temporary holder, just looking for where it's going to put it inside, right? So it's just like it's storing it temporarily, but it needs you to provide like a variable for you to put in the value, the total value that you calculated into. Let me come back again. So this is what happened here. So we said, okay, add these two variables or add these two values, and then return the result. So now we said, okay, now I have the result. Where do you want me to put it inside? You get so, and then we said, okay, I want you to put the result, the value that you are temporarily holding, put it into this result variable, and then we printed out the result. Now, let's go back to the function that we used to print for. So now if we do this, now we would have 8 and then we'll have none. Let me quickly remove this and then run this. Now, what we have here is that we have results to equal to add our function called add underscore 2 and 3 plus 9, and then we run the code. We just got 8. I mean, like, okay, but I did not call you, so why are you coming out? Just like that when they say, they didn't call you, but they asked you. So it doesn't actually make sense. But then again, it depends on what they are trying to achieve. So here, after I defined my variable and then called the function, you just returned the result. You didn't even say anything. Like no explanation, you're just showing yourself. You get so let me go back to the former code. So you see that when I run this code showing only this, it just returns the result with no explanation, nothing. You didn't wait for me to call you, it just came out like that. And then when I say, okay, I want you to actually print out the result, now it shows you none. Because now, what happens is that when you use print in your function, print does not hold the value for you, waiting for where to put it. It just drops it on you, like without any announcement, without any explanation, nothing. You didn't even tell me you are coming to my house. It just showed up like that. You know, if someone just shows up at your doorstep without any explanation, like, okay, I'm coming to visit you, you're like, sorry, please mute your mic if you are muted. So that, like the housing example that was given, if someone should just show up at your doorstep and say, okay, I'm here to visit you, and you don't explain yourself, you didn't tell me ahead of time, you didn't give me a heads up, you'd be like, okay, so why are you here? Did I call you? Did you tell me you're coming? So that's the idea here, because what return does is that it puts the value waiting for where to put it, and then you call it out, right? But for print just throws it up in your face and say, oh, I beg, I'm tired of holding it, take it, right? So that's the difference between using return and using print in your function call. This mic is unmuted. I'm hearing voices. Please mute your mic for the sake of everybody on the call. Please mute your mic. Thank you. All right, so that's the difference between the both of them. So here I just tried to reiterate the same example again. And I said, okay, I said this results in 4 because the print statement in the function prints but does not return the result in order to assign it to a new variable. So imagine a case where you are trying to define a function where after you've called it, you can now assign it to a different variable, like you can now assign it to a container to hold it in place until you need it in the future. And you end up using print, and then print is just throwing to your bed like, take a bag, I'm not doing it again. You get so that's the whole idea. So you want to understand or you want to decide on which of them to pick. Think about the house example I gave about someone just showing up at the doorstep and someone actually giving you a heads up before actually showing up at the doorstep. Moving on to another example. So here I said define even, odd, and variable. VAR is the name of the parameter. So by now, I expected that we would have gone through the operators. Let me go back to this sheet. There is a notebook on Python operators, so in case you can't actually follow, I'll try to explain what this means. But in case you can't follow or you are having some confusion, you also say I'm using if and else statements. Just go back to your course outline, look for the notebook on Python operators and go through it. Same thing goes for the if and else statements. Actually, a recommended learning video there. Just go through it and you'll be able to follow. So for here, I said, okay, now I'm defining an even, because the function, the idea of the function, or what we want the function to be able to do, is to be able to decide, okay, this value I have given you, is it an even number or is it an odd number? Now, humanly speaking, if someone should ask you, is 2 an even or odd number, you can say, okay, 2 is an even number, obviously. But now, if you should have a very long value like what you have here, now it would ask you, okay, is this an even or odd number? You're like, okay, how am I supposed to know? You now start looking for a calculator or quickly maybe asking ChatGPT. But in your code, you can easily just define a function and say, okay, and then the block of code inside your function is saying, if the variable being entered, when you divide it by 2, is equal to 0, that means it's actually in. But if it's not equal to 0, that means you need to return odd as the result of your analysis. Let me come back again. What this function does is that when you enter your value or your particular figure, it now runs you through its code, and the block of code or the set of instructions given your function is that, okay, this particular value. So if, for example, I had entered 4, let me use 4. I want to see if this number again, so let me just remove it and then just put 4 instead. Now, let's run this. Now, let me take us through the process. So we have that, okay, even odd, I entered the number 4. So what it does is that it says, okay, if 4, when you divide it by 2, is equal to 0. And there's no remainder. That's what it means. That after you divide 4 divided by 2, between 2 goes into 4, that gives you 2 remainder 0. So it says if 4 divided by 2 is equal to 0, that there's no remainder, that means return even as the result of your analysis, right? And then you say, if however it is not, there is a remainder and it's not equal to 0, return odd. Now let's do this with 5 instead. Now, when you do 5 over 2, you have 2 going to 5, 2 times remainder 1. So now that 1 is not equal to 0. That means this first line of code, this particular first line of code does not work, and then it has to return the result as odd. Let me go back to our previous value here. And then I run this code. Now we have that this value is actually an odd number. It is not an even number. That's how it works. Now, this is another block of code. And here we're trying to say, okay, enter a number. We're trying to prompt the user to enter in a figure. So please, again. Like this course outline is rightly organized. You ought to have been able to go through all of these things here mentioned from start to finish, and then during the broadcast sessions, I can always address whatever questions you have. So that's why I included Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that you know, okay, on this particular day, what am I learning? And then you move to the next day, right? So in case you have any confusion, please refer to the course outline so that you can backtrack and then get yourself up to speed. So here, let me run this code. So now, what this first part does is that it prompts the user to enter in the value. So let me enter in the value. I'm not sure what value I'm typing, but let's hope that you're able to define or decide if it's even or odd. And then after typing in the code, I press enter. Now, it does mean the number is even. So again, this first block of code, or this first 2 lines of code, just is used to prompt the user to input a figure. Let me run it again so that you can see how it works. Let me enter a simple number. Let's say 543, and then I press enter. Now the number is what? So we just use our function that we defined earlier to prompt a user to say, okay, enter in a figure, and I'll tell you, like you say, show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are. Or in this case, just enter your number, and I'll tell you what your number or where your number belongs to. Okay. So I also gave an example here, or I was trying to explain what return is. I said, think of return as you designed to be able to use the result of your function code in variables in every other place in your code. So what the return keyword does in a Python function code is that it helps you to be able to transfer the value that it is carrying into a variable that you can use in other places in your code. So please remember that when defining your code. All right. So you can read on this later. Let me quickly move forward. All right. So I said writing a program to multiply a number with 10 if the given number is odd. Now we are getting a bit complex. Remember that what is here, let me highlight it. What is here is the block of code, the set of instructions you want your function to carry out. Now we are saying that, okay, we want a case whereby if the number that you have entered in is actually odd, then multiply that number by 10. Yes. So now we're saying, okay, the first one, if number divided by 2 and the remainder is not equal to 0. So in the first one, we see that we use double equal sign to say equal to, and here we're using exclamation mark and the equal to, which means not equal to, right? So if the number, when you divide it by 2, does not and it has a remainder, it means that you should multiply that number by 10. And this is actually an odd number. Or else, if the number you entered is actually an even number, just return the number. So let me run it and then try something. So let's think of something. Let's say we pick an odd number. Let's say we pick 7 as our odd number. We enter 7, press enter. Now it says, okay, this number you've entered, 7 divided by 2, 2 going to 7. That gives you 3 remainder 1. And 1 is obviously not equal to 0. So that means that, okay, I have to multiply this number by 10. And when it does that, it returns 7. So let me run the code again. And then let's enter 70 and press enter. Now, since 70 is an even number, it just returns the number 2. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't touch it. It just returns the value as we expected it to enter. To return. All right, moving on. We have, okay, more on the function definition. I'm calling a function. So I said, in this, from what you can see here, I used triple single quotation mark. That is quotation marks or single quotation marks in 3 places. Now, what this does is that notice the inline comments made within the function cell. So what this does is that it helps you to explain to people what you're actually trying to do. So I said, okay, define my first function, or let's make this more descriptive as let's say calculate, just calc, and then we put area, and then I say, okay, so this function, what this function means is that this function is supposed to, this function calculates the area of a rectangle. Okay, here is a G, yeah, and then let's just leave this as it is for now, and then we click on this. Now, what it shows is that, give me a minute. Now, what it shows is that what this thing here shows is that it helps you define, or it helps you explain what your code does. So as you move further in your data science journey, you begin to find out that, okay, you're actually building like a very lengthy function. I need to be able to tell the users or whosoever will be going through it, you can go through that, okay, this is what your function is actually supposed to do. Just think about it as you providing a description for your function. Just like when you go to buy let's say you want to buy a product, it's really like a product description that tells you, okay, this headset has these features, and these features. So that's the same idea that applies in this for this sort of situation. Let me go back to what we had, and then I run this again. Yeah, so we have that in place, and then when I call this, I have our print. So it just gives me back what I gave it, the garbage in, garbage out. And then I say that running the line of code below retrieves the descriptive text explaining what the code does. So remember I said that this hash sign here is used to define comments, or is used to tell Python that, okay, Python, this particular line of code, you don't have to run it. I'm just explaining what my code does. So since I've been able to explain what my function was about here, in order to retrieve this particular text, let's say for example, I finished defining my function. I want to understand what was the purpose of this function. You just come back here and then say my function dot double underscore doc double underscore another double underscore. So doc is just to retrieve, is just to pull out that line of code, or that line that talked about the description of your code. You get, so just please have it in mind. So I noted here that this particular attribute provides a way to attach documentation to code objects like functions, classes, and modules. And I'll come back to what modules mean very soon as we progress. So I say it is used to promote clean, well documented and maintainable code in Python. So then let's move on. So here we have retrieve the documentation for the range function. Now, range is a function in Python. So just like you can define your own function, those are called user-defined functions. So the function that you don't have to define, these are called user-defined functions. However, Python also has its own functions that have been created over the years by several people and by the Python community. So this range function is an example of an inbuilt function in Python. When we run this, now we have range objects, range start. So it shows you so all of this text that you can see here now has been entered in like manner, or could be entered in like manner as this here, right? So it's possible that the people that the creators of the range function actually entered all of this in between this quotation mark, and I can actually show you what that looks like. So let me just quickly copy it. Let me just copy this down first. Copy, and then I come to this. So let me just delete it and then create, yeah. And then I paste it. Let's indent this so that it looks better. Yeah, we're good. And remove the extra space. And run our code. Now, when we retrieve the doc of that particular function, now this is what we have. So you can see that it has been entered in like manner as what we've seen above. So it just tells you, okay, it returns an object that produces a sequence of integers from start to stop and then steps it up. So you can, at your own time, look further into what this range function actually does. I don't want to use that as an example for us. So yeah, I said write a function that takes a number and then squares it. So it's still that same example of, okay, adding your block of code, or your block of code, or what you want your function to do, and then adding it to the print function or to the print statement. So if we run this, we have 6. So the square of 6 is 36, obviously, as you can see from here. So double asterisk is used to denote square. So if you use single asterisk, if you simply just multiply the number by 2, let me show you that. Now, you simply multiply the number by 2. However, if you should use double asterisk, it gives you 36, right? And that is that for that. Now, so a bit of a different concept. We have a case where I want to return multiple values. So we don't just want to return one value, we want to be able to return multiple values. So now we have a situation where we have 2 values. we're trying to create a function where it will take in two values, but then it will be able to add those values and also subtract, like like subtract one value from the other, and then return both results. You get. So what all we do is that we say, okay, first of all, define the function. We do our normal, create our normal syntax and say define add underscore sub, taking two variables or taking two numbers, a and b, and then we'll say, first of all, add equal to a plus b, and then we'll say if a is greater than b, then we say, okay, no, what we want to do is we want sub, we want to create a variable name called sub that we say a minus b. However, if we want a case where if however b is greater than a, we want to say b minus a. Let me come back again. So our function takes in two variables, a and b, and under normal circumstances, it will add it together, whether a is big or b is bigger. But we said, okay, for the addition part, because we don't want to return a negative value, so we say instead, we now create an if-else statement and say instead, if a is bigger than b, then I want you to subtract b from a. However, that's what the else statement means. If b is actually greater than a, we said, okay, I want you to subtract a from b. And then we say, I want you to return the add and then the sub. The add and the sub refers to variables, it refers to containers. So this add here is our variable, is our container holding the summation of a plus b, and our sub is another container holding the difference between a and b, or b and a. When we run this, now it prompts us to enter two numbers, or it prompts us to enter one number first. Let's say let's enter simple number. Let's say 2. Press enter. Another prompt, and we enter, let's say 4. Now the a value is 2, right? And the b value is 4. And then we press enter. Now 4 plus 2 is obviously 6. But then what now happen? How do we have 2 as our difference here? But let me use something else so that we can see the difference easily. So let's say we enter 5, enter, and then we enter 45, enter 45, enter. Now, when you come to this first line here, add is equal to 5 plus 45. That was how we ended up with 50 here. And then we now came and said, okay, A is A greater than B? We checked and we're like, okay, no. A is not affected. Actually, A is not greater than B. That is, A is actually smaller than B. So he now skips this part, and went to this part and said, okay, since B is greater than A, I need to do B 45 minus 5. And then we returns 40 as our answer. And that was how we arrived at this total value. Now, here is another one. I said, okay, let me print this. So we have enumerate dots, this attribute again here. And you can see that on Google, like when you take your cursor and hover around a keyword, it tells you what it's being contained. So enumerate is like another function, and they were just simply trying to return or trying to retrieve the documentation attached to this enumerate function, inbuilt function, if I may say, in Python. Now we move over to the next part, module. So let me just quickly take questions before we move over. All right, questions. Okay. So if you have any questions on what we talked about so far on about functions, just drop it in the chat. Let me quickly adjust so we can move on. Okay. So the question starts from. Okay, Donna, this is your first time of joining. How do you download it? Okay, what I need someone to go to the Discord channel and then highlight that article that I posted about downloading Jupyter Notebook. So Donna, just look for a highlight on that message on Discord. You'll find it. Okay. And Bumi, let's look at your issue later on. I'm looking for questions regarding functions that we've treated so far. Okay, Chidima is asking what the difference is between parameter and argument when writing a function. Actually, it's the same thing. You can think about it the same thing, at least for now. Just think about parameter as the same thing as argument. So don't confuse yourself. There might be maybe slight difference, but for this particular point in this course, think about it as it's being interchangeable. So you can call parameters arguments, or you can call arguments parameters. For applications, are you going to be using Jupyter Notebook or so like I said, the okay, this is a response. Like I said, for the course of this for the course of this program in data science, we'll be using Jupyter Notebook or Google Lab. So if your laptop is a bit slow or maybe you're afraid of it being able to carry whatever you want to do, then you can use Google Lab. Okay. So Aminu, so the enumerate function, like I said, you can, I know that by now you would have installed the Python, like you already have Jupyter on your laptop, so you can just try it out to find out what it is. From here, you can see that it says it yields pairs containing accounts from start, which defaults to 0, and the value yielded by the iterable argument. So you can try it out, and you find that sometimes you even give an example. This is trying to give you an example for what it can actually be done. So in case you want to find out what it does in action, you can actually try it out and see what it does. This is the part where you actually practice. How can I access the file you are using? And if you go back to your course outline, the sheet I shared, but looking at Python functions. So Python functions, if you come here, you can see the research notebook here, and the book that you just click on it and take you to this particular notebook you are using. So any other questions before we move on? Okay. Can you make example of solve with this operator? All right, and Ejimba, you would have to try it out yourself because we are actually running out of time. We have about less than 30 minutes, or a bit over 30 minutes. So I need to address modules. But I will need Ejimba, you can try it out and then let me know in Discord channel if you have any issues with it, or if you are experiencing any errors. I think that's all for the functions. So give me a thumbs up if you can proceed. Give me a thumbs up so we can proceed. Are we good? Okay. All right. I'm glad you are following. All right. So as I'm moving to the next section, we drop whatever questions you have in the chat, and we should be able to address it. All right, modules. Now, this is going to be a bit of a big move from functions into modules, but I will do my best to explain it in a way that we can all understand, and it's before our time elapses. So I said that when you start working with Python, when you start writing more code and more functions, you might write all of your code in one file. But however, when your programs become larger, managing everything in one place becomes a bit messy. So just like, let's say, for example, like you want to put your kitchen, your bathroom, your parlor, and your room in the same space, and you're not even trying to segment it, you can find that it becomes like, how would you have your kitchen in the same place as your bathroom, as your sleeping area, as your living area, and everything? So you find that at some point you might have to begin to segment them or begin to put walls to create some sort of structure or to define allocate spaces to it. So I want you to have that example in mind as we talk about what modules are. So I said here that a module in Python is simply a file that contains Python codes, and these Python codes could either be functions or variables or classes that can be used by other Python programs. And I said here that they help you organize your code, they help you make it easy for you to use your code, and help you maintain your code as well. So let me put all of that in English into practicality. And let's say, for example, and let's say we have something like this. So since I'm not working on my local device, I would have to explain this to you and then you can try it out. So what this means is that, let's say for example, you want to create a module, and then in that module, you want to be able to have several processes where you can either add your number or subtract or multiply or actually divide. So you see that here I said, okay, rather here I gave particular steps in which you can go to. So I said you can use a Visual Studio Code for this, and you create a Python file called this, and define the function in which you want to use, and then import this calc module and then run it. That is for if you're using Visual Studio Code, but since you are not, we would stick with this method so instead. So here I said, okay, you can create your own module by simply writing some Python code in a .py file and saving it. And then later on, you can create a module called my module.py. So what this means is that you create a Python file. So a Python file is the difference between a Python file and a Jupyter notebook is that the Jupyter notebook has .ipynb and a Python file has .py. So this simply means just like with your PDFs. You know, when you see a PDF file, you see .pdf. And if you see a video file, you see .mp4. If it's an audio file, you see .mp3, right? So it's the same idea that applies here. So you know that you have a Python code that says that a Python, rather a Jupyter notebook that ends with .ipynb, and then you have a Python file that ends with .py, and then you can save it. So in that .py file, which is just simply a Python file, you can copy and paste this. So this is where I'll need you guys to actually practice this on your own, and then let me know if you have any issues so I can address it. So you copy and paste this thing, this particular code. So what this code does is that it defines a function to add two numbers, define another function to subtract two numbers, another to multiply, and another to divide. So what you end up doing is that you say, if you have a question, I'm just raising up your hands. Okay. If you have a question, drop it in the chat. It's easier to address that way. But you can't have everyone unmuting their mics to speak. All right. So, all right, moving on. So remember that this method I said is for if you're using Visual Studio Code. But if you're not using Visual Studio Code, I'll just move on to the second example. And then we'll do this. So now, since you're using the second module, you can just say, using method 2, the name of our .py file is going to be my module. So I say, okay, this module is going to be my module and my module alone. And then we say my module.py, and then we'll define it as define our bit function to take in a name and then say hello name, and define another function add to take in two values A and B. In the former example that I was talking about, we defined 4 different functions, and each of these functions had different tasks to perform. The first task was to add numbers together. The second task was to subtract one value from the other. The third task was to multiply one value by the other. And the last task was to define the first value by the second value, right? So when you do all of this and then add it to your calc module, you find that you can just simply say, okay, import calc. So calc is the name of our module, just like you import. When we move over to the next module, to the next module of this course, you will see where we're able to say import numpy, import pandas, import Seaborn, import matplotlib. So all of these things are libraries, or what we can call even greater modules that contain several functions inside it to help you perform your task. Right? So here we can see that after we defined all of these and put it into our calc.py file, we can just simply say import, and then we say calc.add. So now we're saying, okay, the name of our module. Okay, let me give a relatable example to this. Let's say, for example, in let's say for example, you decide to get you get a charger, and then your charger decides your charger or your charger pack or your charger board came with two cords. So now you can say, okay, oh, I want to charge my phone, and your phone is USB. So you just simply plug it and then you plug your phone, right? But if you want to say, okay, no, I want to use my other cord, maybe your Type-C cord to maybe charge your power bank, you remove this, drop it, and bring your Type-C cord and plug it instead. That's the same idea that happens here. So now I already have like the charger example I gave earlier. I gave earlier. This is an example of a function. But now in my calc.py, I have several functions. Just like I have my this is my .py file, and then I have several functions which has either a Type-C code or a Type-D code or whatever kind of code. And then depending on what you want to do, just simply pick up your code. And then plug it to what you want to do. So it's the same idea that applies here. So we say we pick up our .py file, which is the charger head in this case, and which is current, and then we say dot the particular function we want to use, and there was in this case which is dot add, and then we put 4 and 7. If we said, okay, no, we want to use subtract, and that is we want to use our Type-C code, we bring our Type-C code, plug it, and it's a different result. So this is it. So what I would like you to do is, in order to practice this, because on Google, like, you might not be able to practice this as much as you would like. What I would like you to do is to download this notebook like I showed you. You come to File, go to Download. You can see I download as .ipynb, download as py. Choose the download as .ipynb file, and then import it into your Jupyter notebook installed on your local device, and then you can run it. All right, so this is the second method I spoke to you about, where you have a my module.py file, and then you have all of these things contained inside it. And when you import this module, this particular my module, you are able to use all of these functions inside. So again, just like with the functions, you have user-defined functions and you have inbuilt functions, right? It also applies to modules. So you have user-defined modules that we tried to, like I've tried to show you guys above here, and then we have common, and then we have inbuilt Python modules. So these inbuilt Python modules or built-in Python modules are just modules that help you perform tasks on your local device or on your version of Jupyter Notebook. So one of the modules, we have several of them actually, a lot of them. So again, like I said, I would like you to run this on your local system, because with your local system, you will be able to access, or you'll be able to use the OS module, but it has to do with your operating system. So, sorry. All right, so what this module does is that it provides an avenue for you to be able to interact with the operating system of your device. So in my own case, since I'm using a Windows operating system, you see that when I run this code, it returns empty, which is used to denote Windows operating system. However, if you're using a Linux or Linux operating system, you know that it's going to return a POSIX, which means POSIX, to denote Unix-like operating system. And then if you want to also understand or know the current working directory you are in, you use this particular code. So what I want you to know is that you don't need to cram all of these things. You don't need to say, but I don't remember this, I'm going to fail my exam. What you can simply do is, if you can't remember, like, okay, what module do I need to use to achieve this result? Simply do a Google search. Okay, what module can I use to interact with my local system? And you will get results. What function or what attribute can I use to get the current working directory, like the current folder you're in, you just do a simple Google search and then you get it and then you are able to apply it. So it's not something you need to start cramming or to start trying to understand. What happens is that as you keep on practicing, as you keep on using these particular modules or functions to work, you begin to understand and remember them. For example, the print statement that we use in our very first class, I mean our second class, up to now, we know that if you want to print out a result, just simply use print, open brackets, you put in whatever you want to print out. And now we know what print does because we've been using it over time. So it's the same thing that applies for all of these modules or functions if you're looking at. So when you, like I said, when you get to your local device, please try out all of this. So when I run this code, this os.listdir just gives me a list of everything, like all of the directories, all of the folders of my local device. And when I ran it, this were everything I had at that particular point. Obviously, this has changed, but this was what I had saved on my local system. Right. So moving on. Then I said, okay, to see a list of operating system environmental variables, I will simply run os.environ. So it shows you all of the parts, all of the variables that your system works with. Because what happens is that there's a whole lot of background work that happens in your local device, that's your laptop or maybe whatever you're using to work. Usually it's advised that you have a laptop so that you can easily work with the notebooks we are going to provide. So you find that there's a whole lot of background processes that happens. So you see that with this module, with this OS module, you can actually interact with your system to find out more information about it. Because for example, the one I actually did it, I found out that, okay, I have all of these environmental variables saved or being used. You can see that there are a lot, and honestly speaking, you might not even understand what each of them is supposed to do. And you can find out that if you do a simple research, you understand what it is. So this was everything. This was all of the environmental variables that my operating system Windows was actually working with to ensure it functions normally. All right. Now we have something different, a different module called platform. So I said that this provides function to access information about the system where my Python code is running. So let's see if you can. Okay, it's similar to the OS module. Again, like I said, why I am not running this on this clean code because this is on the cloud, and these particular modules are meant to interact with your local system. For example, your laptop. So again, when you get home or when you download this notebook, make sure you run through all of this code, all of this block of codes I've just shown you, and then you let me know if you have any issues. So this shows me, okay, what's the version of my laptop, or what's the version of the Windows on my laptop, what kind of system, is it Windows, is it Linux, is it whatever you're using, and okay, this shows me the particular version down to like the minute details, and it also shows me, okay, what this last code here, or this last attribute gives me more information about my laptop or my particular system. So it shows me that, okay, it's actually a Windows system and it has the multiprocessor is actually free, right? So you can use this to get more information about your system. Same thing applies to this, more information. Okay, it provides methods to extract information about the parts and file names on your local device. Alright, finally to something we can actually interact with. So let me run this code so I can show you something. Okay, so we have a module called dates, we have a module called time, and we have a module called date time. And in order to bring a module from one place to the other, or make a module active in your current working environment, you have to use the import keyword. So let's say, for example, you have defined, like I mentioned, that you defined your calc function, or your calc, let me go back to that part. Yeah, you define your calc module. So in order to now bring it into your Jupyter notebook and start working on it or be able to use it, you have to say import calc. So when you do that, it activates that particular module, and then you can access all of the classes, or you can access all of the functions inside of it. Okay, not too fast. Where were we? Yeah, okay, we're somewhere there. Back here. So you see here that I said from date time import dates. Now this is just like saying, like the example I was just like saying from. All right, let me go back. From calc import add comma sub. Not sub, that just sub. We only need sub. All right. So okay, in this case, date time is the name of the module. We are saying, okay, since this module has so many functions, we don't want to import all of the functions, but we just want to pick out the date function, and we also want to pick out the time function. I want to pick out the date time function. I know that you start asking, okay, why are we having this time and date time again? You see why below. All right, so again, let me go back to the calc function so we can understand what I'm saying. So the calc function, like we can see here, had, or rather the calc module had several functions inside it. It had add, it had sub, it had multiply, it had divide. Now, when you say import calc, it just imports everything inside for you. It imports add, sub, multiply, divide, maybe whatever function you added inside the calc, it just imports everything to you. And sometimes you might not necessarily need everything inside a particular module. You might just need, okay, I only need the add function from the calc module. That's what we're trying to define here when we say from date time import date, just like I said, from calc import then add. So instead of actually like writing this into multiple lines of code, I can just come and say, okay, from date time import date, import time, and import dates. Let me quickly do that. Import date time is the second one, and then I can just erase all of this. So there are several ways to kill it. Right? I can either decide to use different lines to import all of these functions. I can just use one line and then just mark it using comma. So I run this again, and it works just fine. Okay. So the first example here is a variable name which we call today, and we say today dates. This date function that we talked about earlier. Dates dot today, and then we run this. So this date today is like an attribute that says, okay, from the date function, I want it to return today's date, right? So when we run this code, we now have today's date is 13th of March 2025. And then we also said, okay, let me remove this so that we know which one is actually printing. Let me remove all of this. And then let's just say print okay. And then we'll say today. And then we run it again. Okay, so we see that when we print out today, when we do date dot today, it returns to this particular date. So if let's say you download this notebook and you run the code tomorrow, it's going to print out tomorrow's date, not today's date, because obviously today has changed. So today is not like tomorrow is no longer today, is no longer today by tomorrow. Today becomes a past in relation to tomorrow. So that's how this particular code works. Let me return what we had initially, and then let us see it bit by bit. So let me remove this, and then we print and we run this again. Now, we said, okay, remember that this variable here contains today's date. But in our principle, we said, okay, no, I want you to print out only today's day. What is today's day? Today's day is 13th, according to the month. And then we'll say, okay, print out today's month. And today's month, today being 13th, is in March, which is the third month of the year. And when we also said, okay, I want you to print out the year as well. So print out the day of the week, what are the day in the month, print out the month number, like what month are we in, and also print out the year, what year are we in as well. And then we also say, finally, I want to print out what weekday we are currently in. And when we run the code, we see that today is obviously 13th. We are in the third month of the year, and this year is 2025. Now, weekday, we are seeing 3, so let's try to count down. We have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Today is Thursday, right? But what in Python starts counting from 0 in this case. So we say Monday is 0, Tuesday is 1, Wednesday is 2, Thursday is 3. Let me come back again. Monday is 0, Tuesday is 1, Wednesday is 2, and Thursday is 3. That's why we have 3 here as the weekday. Let me bring back our comma code. All right, so that's how we do this. And then let's also see what this looks like. Let me take this out. Let me just copy it and paste it down so I can remove that one. All right. Let's see something different. Now, when you use, initially we had used dates and then we did today. It gave us today's date. But let's take it a step further. We say date time. So we combine date and time. So that date time is like a combination of dates and time functions together. So with dates, you're only dealing with dates as a whole. With time, you're only dealing with time as a whole. But with the date time function, you are dealing with date and time together, depending on what you want to do. So when we ran this code and said date time now, it shows us, okay, today's date, the time, this is 18.48, and all of these things here are the seconds. So this 18 is used to represent the hour, like count on a 24-hour scale, like counting like after 12, 13, 14, 15, not 12 and then going back to 1, but after 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, down to 18. And you can see that this is 1848, and all of these things here are seconds and milliseconds. So this shows us the hour, the minutes, the second, and then milliseconds. Let's bear that in mind. So we've seen this, and we've not seen this yet. So let me remove this and then erase this. Now, let's try something a bit different. When we run this again, we have 1849, 36, and then all of this here. Now we said, okay, initially we had, let me go back to what we had initially so that we can see the difference. Okay. This was what we ran earlier, right? So when we remove this and then we run this, right? I don't want to remove this as well. Let me go back. And then we run this. Now we saw the date time, and we already saw the date. The date, today's date was attached to the time as well. But then when we decided to run this other code, let me remove this part. That doesn't concern us for now. And then we run the code again. We found that it only retrieved the time section, the hour of the day, the minute of the day, and then the time, the second, and the milliseconds. So what you could do is that you could just play around with these things, with these functions. They are not for you to explore. You could play around with them and then see how the results change depending on what you want to do. So now moving down. So remember the example I gave about how you can retrieve the documentation associated with a function, for example. Now, for a module, it's a bit different because for a module, you just simply use help, open brackets, this time, or the name of the module. Let me give a quick example. Let's say we want to find out what, we want to pull out the documentation of the OS module, for example. So we do help, type the name of the module, and then we press enter, or rather, we run it here. Okay, said OS is not defined. Let's use, let's use platform instead. Let's see if that works. Okay, still the same thing. Okay, so you will find out that the reason why it's behaving like this is because it hasn't been run yet. Like I mentioned, you have to run this module so that it becomes activated in your system, in your current working Jupyter notebook. Because what happens is that when you close your Jupyter notebook and open it up again, all of your variables, all of your functions you define, they're no longer in active, they're no longer current. They've just been in a passive state. So you running your functions again, or you running your variables again, or running your modules again, just activate it and say, okay, now I'm ready to work, wake up. But the moment you close your Jupyter notebook, you said, okay, all of you go and sleep. This is time to rest. But once you open up your Jupyter notebook, you have to rerun those functions, those variables, and those modules again, so they become active once more. So I will just use this example here. Let me delete this. All right, so let's also run this. Now, you can see it was able to run successfully because we had already defined it. We had already run it earlier when we're talking about the date time module. Okay. All right, so you can see all of these things here are several. Let me go back to the very top. So all of these things, the date time is the name of the module, and remember when I talk about methods and attributes, so all of these are several methods you can use. But the fun part is, let me scroll down, is the functions. Now, the count example I gave above had several functions. It had add, it had sub, it had multiply, it had divide. Here you can see it has so many functions. It has the sorry, I think I'm scrolling down. Yeah, it has the timestamp, it has the time, it says returns time object with the same time, but with the time zone or the information about the time zone equal to none. And then we have here that, okay, all right. So here we also have like I think I saw something right. Let me go down. Okay. I'm on the right to misbehave. Oh, I think we're good. All right. So, okay, for example, now here we said that, okay, strip time or strp time, since that it is a string, and that it says it takes in date time and then arranges it as a string. You get, so if it's taking in anybody are putting in, any date time variable you are putting into it, it organizes it and then returns it as a string to you. So you can explore all of these things I mentioned here, like the dates I showed you here, the replace I showed. Okay, I've not showed the replace. Another time here, which is a function. So you can see that you can come to our initial code. Let me go back. So you call date, you call time, you can call replace. And if you run the code, you shouldn't get an error. Okay. And cannot import name replace from date time. All right, so let's go back and see what the issue is. All right. Why is it not showing? Okay. So instead we could import time, but we couldn't import replace. But so let us try something instead. Let's see what we can use. Okay, so please also note that as you go down, you'll be able to see like more information about what all of these functions do. So here we also have static methods, and we have data descriptors that are being defined here, like the microsecond, the hour, the the minute and the second itself. And then I'm trying to look for something that we could actually use. Okay. I think we'll just leave that for now. I'll just work with it and then show it to us later on. Let's move on for now because the time is against us. Let me just run this again. And we are good. So that's it for the date time. This is really long. As to show you the amount of documentation and time that went into it. So the following sections will be called will include formatting data and time outputs with the strft time function. And then I'll also be talking about, let me move down, using time delta objects. It's really long. Yeah, and also the maths module as well. So we also have a maths module that has so many other functions inside. So instead of having to do cos, cosine, sine, and tangent by yourself or using a calculator, you can obviously use the maths function. We also have the random module here. I'm just trying to round up so that I can take some questions before we call it a day. And then we have the rand int function, the info function, choice function. And please, you can, like I said, download this notebook and then run all of these codes so that you can see what each of them mean. You have the rand range function, the sample function, and the web browser module. This module is used to interact with or interface with web-based documents. So you can also try it out and use the help function or the help keyword to gain more information about it. Okay, I just saw something now. I wanted to show us. Yeah, we also have a calendar module. Let me show us something fun down. So we can actually retrieve something like this. Okay, let me run this. I think this will be the last one I do before we go. Now, you can see import calendar. So if you are trying to retrieve like the calendar for a particular month and then year, you can simply do import calendar and then let's change it to 2027 instead and say 12th month and then run it. Now it returns the calendar as you see it on your phone in Python or in your Jupyter notebook. And if you want to display the calendar for the entire year, let me choose 2020 or 2030. And then I run the code. You have your calendar for 2030. This is what it is here. All right, so something similar below. Okay, so down here I have like a mini task for you to do. So you're not submitting it. You're not submitting it. It's just for you to be able to see the logic behind some functions or the logic behind creating like functions or creating modules that will help you solve a problem, right? So this is something similar to what we have. You can check it out. You can run the notebook and then you can address whatever questions that you have. So yeah, let's take in. So let's take some questions. Let's take some questions. If you have any questions, please drop it in the chat so we can address it. Any questions? Okay. AJ, but I'm not sure I understand your question. Okay. Are you saying you don't understand the dev? Okay. I think I understand your question. So I said that the reason why I provided this course outline to us is so that we'll be able to go through the course content and go through recommended them because with 2 hours, 2 hours for 2 times a week, and our blocker sessions are not enough to cover everything. Like I would like to, if I should have classes every day, I would like to do that, but that is not possible, logically speaking, right? So I have loved to cover everything, But at the same time, there's a part that you have to play. You have to go to this course material, and that's why I always portrays on asking questions, asking questions, asking questions. If you have any question, maybe you don't understand any of the concepts that you've gone through or that you studied, it's now there for you to now ask us questions or ask me questions, and then I can provide clarification. So, engine, by now to understand this control flow or this what I did during this part, I would recommend or would direct you to the course material for Monday. So start from Monday, the Python operators, the if else statements, the for and while loop, and then these notebooks as well. These notebooks as well. It will help you understand. So if at this point you are sorry, if at this point you are still a bit confused, just you can start from the very beginning or from the live sessions so that you can actually understand what is going on and be able to solve your issue. All right, I think there's a few of questions. All right, Ejimba, have I answered your question? You can speak, unmute your mic. Okay, I don't think I have a question. So if you have any questions, please let me know so that we can address it before we call it a day. Any questions, any confusions? Are you still having issues with your dashboard? How do you like the sound for today? Is it good? I know that we had some issues yesterday. We're supposed to have our blocker session, so I promised you that I was going to fix it. So I'm glad that today was able to us went through. Timothy is just joining us. I don't know if you've been in this class or maybe you had network issues. So any questions, you can raise up your hand and I'll give you the floor so you can speak. You can drop it in the chat box. Kola Wale, I'm sorry, I know that doing it, but you can turn off your camera. Oyetunde, please turn off your camera. All right. Anyone says the sound is a work in progress. I'm happy that we're making progress. I know yesterday most of us were frustrated with the sound. So I'm happy that we've actually moved on. Okay, Judith, I don't know why you joined in late, but please, you can go back to the recording so that you can follow through. Oyetunde has refused to turn off his camera. I'm not sure why, and I hope you can hear me. Please turn off your camera. Okay, Ejimba, you can speak. Unmute your mic and speak.
Yeah, I'm having difficulties getting that outline. The one you are displaying is different from the one I
Okay.
had. I have the Excel, the spreadsheet. I can't see that particular one that has this red stripe and all those ones.
Okay, let me send it to you. I'm sending it to the Discord channel now. While this comes up, do you have any other issue? Ejimba, any other issue? Yeah, we'll take that as a no. Any other questions? Okay, Moses' hand is raised. Moses, you have the floor. You can speak.
All right, good evening, ma'am. Please,
Good
the
evening.
first question I want to ask, after the first module, are they going to remove everything from our dashboard? That's number one.
No, it is still
Number
be there.
two, is it still here? Yeah, okay. Number two, this thing that you said we should download, because I've installed a Python, an uncoded Python Jupyter notebook on my laptop. But you now said we should download another thing. So, other than I couldn't hear you clearly. That's why I want to ask again.
Okay. So I was talking about the notebooks. You have to be able to practice on your local device. So I hope I'm still sharing my screen. Yeah. So you can come to file, like when you go to this course outline, when you click on any of this, let me click on this one. If you open up in Google Lab, let's allow this to open up. So it will open up in still loading. It will open up in Google Colab, and then you come to File, and then look for a download button and download IPYNB file. And when you do that, you'll be able to open it up here. It's the same process. You'll be able to open it up on your local device, on your local system. So what I'll do is that when I get on my laptop, because I'm currently on the desktop, when I get on my laptop, I will do like a short video on how to navigate the Jupyter notebook, but it looks like some people are having issues on how, okay, if I download the Google Colab notebook, how do I open it up on Jupyter notebook? So I will do a video and then share it with you for us so that we can get that. So Moses, have I answered your question? Moses, did I answer your question?
I couldn't hear you clearly then. I couldn't see anything. That's why. My network went out. Yes. You said you would do short video and send it to us, ma. Like how to navigate through the Python.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'll be expecting
exactly.
that. I believe that will help. Thank you so much, ma.
You're welcome. Endurance, how is attendance taken? Okay, so if you notice, please, it's important that we go through the messages on Discord. This is still loading. We will give it some time. It's coming up. Let me paste this. So I can't remember who asked for the spreadsheet. So I've posted it in the Discord channel, so you can go there and access it. So if you paid attention to Discord channel, you find that the CX team has sent in like I think a Google form link for you to fill, to give like a rating on the classes you've been attending. If there's anything you don't like about it, like basically give us a review so that we know how to do better. So that's filling that form is also going to act as your attendance. So it's important that whenever that form is being posted on the group, that you go through the form, fill it up, and then submit it. That's how we take attendance. Okay. Do I need to still download an account or? Okay, so Ejimba, like I said, there are several ways to the market. There are several ways to play the rats. You could decide to download with Anaconda and then open up Jupyter Notebook through Anaconda, or you could decide to use the command prompts or the Windows PowerShell, like I showed us the other day, to access your Jupyter Notebook, or you could use Google Colab. It just depends on which one you decide to use. Like I mentioned, for some, the Anaconda software might take a long while for you to download. So maybe while you're downloading the Anaconda software, you could start using Google Colab to practice, or you could use the PIP command prompt that I showed you. So let me show us. I will paste it. I think I've posted that in earlier on the group on Discord channel. So I'll find it and then we highlight it again so that we can easily. Okay, endurance. I think they'll be resending it. They'll be resending another form soon enough. So just look out for it. So again, but I'll look for the link to the guide on the article, and then I'll make it available so that in case you haven't downloaded it, you can easily use that link to download. Any other question? Anyone raising up their hand? All right. Chidimma, unmute your mic and tell me how the class was. Do you have any questions? Was anything confusing? As Chidimma age of 4, right? Yeah. Okay. Right, no
The class is fine. The class is okay.
Okay. Did you have any confusion? Did you find anything confusing during the class today? Do you need further clarification?
No, ma. When I go through the recordings, I'm sure I will understand better. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Who else should I call? If you want to speak, raise your hand so that I can call you. And then, if you don't have any questions, if they don't have questions. Okay, Moses, go ahead and speak.
Please, it's about the if function, if else and elif, and that nested if. I'm confused about it. I don't know if you're still going to talk about it or do a short recap about it. If not, maybe if you've treated it now. That's the
Okay,
if function.
let me see if I can quickly go back. Let me find where I used the if else statements. Okay, I think it's way down. Okay, so this is an example. Let me see if I can find something simpler. I think this is the only example I'm having. Okay, so let me try to explain it in a relatable example. Now let's think about this. So we want to define a function that says, or we want to be able to say, okay, if you step out, let's say you are seated in your house and you want to go out, and let's say you want to go to the supermarket, or you want to go to the market, or you want to go to work, and then you say, if I step out and look at the weather, and the weather is cloudy, come inside and take an umbrella. Now, that if statement, that you saw where I used if, right? So I'm saying if I step out of my house, like if I step out of my door and look at the weather and the weather is cloudy, come back inside and take an umbrella. Else, what that else means that is the alternative that, okay, if I step outside and I look at the weather and the weather is not cloudy, I can continue moving, right? So that's what the if else statement looks like. And then if you're just saying, okay, if I step out and look at the weather and the sky is cloudy, come inside and take an umbrella. Elif, that's another condition is saying, if I step out and I look at the weather and the weather is sunny, come back inside and take the sunglasses. And then else is saying, okay, if I step out and condition 1 and 2, which condition 1 was, if the weather was cloudy, come inside and take an umbrella. If the weather is sunny, come inside and take a sunshades. So the else is saying that if none of these conditions were fulfilled, then you can keep going to work, right? So Moses, did you get that example? Just give me a thumbs up if you got it so I can go back to the notebook.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Thank you.
when you want to think about the if else statement, let's think about it in the example I just gave in that example. So what you do is that whatever concept you learn, try to relate it to something in your physical world so that it can help you remember it. So in this code, I said, okay, my code is saying, you know what my function is, even, odd, and I'm saying, okay, taking a variable or taking a value. Now, if when you divide that value and there is a remainder and the remainder is equal to 0 or the remainder is not, okay, let me use this particular one. I'm saying taking a value when you step out. Now check, is the sky cloudy? This code is saying, okay, taking that value. Now check if that value is taken in, if you divide it by 2, is there a remainder? So that is there a remainder that is equal to 0? So when you learn about operators, you understand that this percentage sign is used to denote remainder. So it's not saying, okay, I'm dividing it and this is the value. It's saying when I divide this value by 2, let me run the code a little bit so that I can show you what that means. So let's say we put in 4. Let me use something else. Let's use 6. And then we run this code. Now it says, okay, now the value you gave me is 6. After I divided it by 2, you know when you do 6 over 2, 2 going to 6 3 times. 3 times remainder 0, right? So now that remainder 0 means that there is no remainder, which is what this particular part is saying. So it's saying that the value that you gave me, after I divided it by 2, there was no remainder. That means remainder is equal to 0. So it returned even. Remember the example I gave. we checked the weather. The weather was cloudy. We took our umbrella and went to work. Else, so if I had entered 7 instead, but I entered 7 instead, and then I run this again. So I'll be having 7 divided by 2. 2 going to 7 will give us 3 remainder 1. So now it has looked at this first condition and said, ah no, it did not meet this condition. Remainder is not equal to 0. And I said, okay, let me go back, let me go to the next option. I said, okay, else, that means it is odd. So I stepped out, checked the weather is not cloudy. I said, okay, I can go to work, right? So if I had an else if statement here now, let me try to do something like that. Else if. And then let's say the okay, why is this misbehaving here? All right, so let's do val. Then we'll do not equal to 0, exclamation mark, not equal to 0. Then we'll do return and then we'll see else. Go to sorry, go up. Okay. Go to work. And then let's run this. Now, remember what I said. So after it has checked, said okay, it fulfilled this first, it does not really fulfill the second condition. It goes to the next condition. In the next condition, it says, okay, oh, the variable is actually not equal to 0 because we had a remainder of 1. So that says, okay, it returns odd. So if we enter something else and then we said it does not fulfill the first and second condition, now you know that it has to return go to work as the final answer, as the final decision out of all of these options that it had. So that is how it works. Let me take this back to its original form. For those of us that will be downloading this to practice, we don't want to confuse us. So, run this again. So Moses, do you understand now?
Yes.
All right. Omar, the attendance form will be sent to the group. Just look out for it. All right. So if there are no questions, any other questions before we call it a day? Any more questions? It's your time to speak up. Don't die in silence. Like I used to always say, it's the best thing you can do for yourself is to ask questions. You not asking questions and thinking that if you ask a question, it will make you feel like you don't know what is happening or it will make people think you don't know what is going on. You are here for yourself, you're here to learn. So it's important you ask questions as when necessary and that you also interact on the Discord channel so that myself or your peers can always help you out and resolve whatever issue you might have. All right, so if that's all, we call it a day. All right. Thank you everyone for making it to today's session. I am really going to be able to make it. So please go to the course materials. We'll be having another live session tomorrow, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Don't miss it. It's very important. And then I'll block our session on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. as well. All right. So have a good night's rest and I will see you tomorrow. All right. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.